A new UN Refugee Agency report on migrants who braved long and often deadly land routes to Libya has found government officials like border guards, police and soldiers in the African countries that they crossed were responsible for nearly half of all cases of physical violence against them. Let's bring in Franz Celestin, Chief of Mission of the International Organization for Migration in Nigeria, to provide insights into the plight of irregular migrants along the central Mediterranean route. Celestin, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday this afternoon. Franz Celestin, it's a pleasure to have you on the program with us. I mean, this is shocking data that we're looking at coming out from the UN, that the majority of violence or physical violence that migrants do face is caused by security agencies such as border patrols and police that they do come across on their journeys. How does your organization, the IOM, react to this? And have you had similar findings as well?
Thank you very much for having me. The plight of the migrants in the central Mediterranean route, or whenever they are migrating, is something that is of concern to us, especially those going to Libya. We've seen an increasing number of them exposed to abuse and exploitation, and a lot of the time is at the hands of these security officials who are actually supposed to protect them. We've seen this in many different countries where the security forces will get them and pack them like sardines in trucks and dump them at the border of Niger, simply because the ECOWAS citizens have free movement within the ECOWAS space, and these authorities in these particular countries would just bring these migrants without any notification and just simply dump them in trucks all over. And we've also seen serious cases of violence and exploitation. But in this particular report, I must say that's a UNHCR report. IOM cannot speak to the specifics of it, but we know and we have seen the level of violence that is perpetrated against migrants by government officials or security forces.
All right, Franz, talk to us about an incident that just happened where 3 Sudanese were shot dead in Libya after ships carrying migrants actually turned back.
Well, unfortunately, that's something that has been happening far too often when security forces and security officials don't seem to care much about human life, especially in these countries, in certain countries in North Africa where migrants are treated like even cattle. I don't know of the specific of this Sudanese case, so I cannot speak to it. But generally, this is something that is very unfortunate and happens far too often.
Far too often, far too prevalent, and that's why on a day like this we have to recognize it, today being World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. And this year's theme is focusing on first responders to human trafficking. So I'd like to ask you, who are first responders that we are speaking of when it does come to human trafficking? And a double question, how has the pandemic also affected the fight against trafficking worldwide, but particularly in Africa?
These are excellent questions. The first responders are those who are working across sectors to identify, prosecute, and also protect the rights of victims of trafficking. So that the first responders are the judges, the prosecutors, the CSOs, the community-based organizations that are supporting these victims. Also, agencies like IOM, UNODC, and the various international organizations that is coming to the rescue of these victims of trafficking. COVID-19 makes it increasingly difficult for these first responders to provide that support and to operate, simply because of the restrictions that are in place, and because the risk that is, that it poses to their health. So as an organization like IOM, what we need to do is to provide the necessary personal protection equipment to these first responders to allow them to do their job effectively, because trafficking doesn't stop because COVID-19 closed a lot of borders. In fact, what we've seen, because of this social economic pressure, a lot more people are vulnerable to trafficking, because most people now will more likely to listen to somebody offering them a better life outside of the community than they were before, and which increase their vulnerability of being trafficked. So it is now that these first responders should be very alert, and they should have the necessary equipment to do their job.
All right, Franz, you spoke about a lot more people being more vulnerable. Let me just do a follow-up to my colleague's question. Are we seeing an uprise in the number of those being trafficked due to in this COVID-19 period, or are the numbers deepening?
Not yet, but I'm worried. In fact, we have flow monitoring points throughout West Africa. What we noticed that there's been a drop in movement of people by 39% from March to May, to late May. We have yet to analyze the latest numbers. But what we've seen, based on the surveys that we've seen of the vulnerable population, especially our people of concern, the migrants that we survey, 90% of them say they face social economic pressures. 96% of them say they face mental health pressures. So what we expect to happen the moment the borders are open, we expect a flood of people trying to exit or trying to move out of the social economic conditions and not increase their vulnerability. So I'm quite worried that once the borders open, there'll be a lot more people trafficked, a lot more people smuggled, and a lot of them will be exploited and abused. This is why we need to start now to look at the possible what we call social economic rescue package to make sure that the people stay where they are in their communities and reduce their vulnerability to being trafficked by these criminal elements. So there's quite a bit that has to be done. We don't see an increase yet, but we expect it to happen fairly soon after the borders open.
And it's a very worrying situation because it kind of seems inevitable with the way in which you've laid it out that when the borders do open, unfortunately, we may be seeing that sort of situation there. But let me bring you up as well, or take you back to the report that we were speaking about, because a great concern and a great worry is every single time a report comes out like this, whether it's the UN, whether it's IOM, whether it's Amnesty, governments are quick to debunk these reports. They're quick to say that these findings are not true. They're quick to say that they have other findings, and they're really quick to just shy away and run away from what is being reported. How do we start to overcome that hurdle? Because unfortunately, it seems like we may end up with a situation like that again because governments are really being accused here.
Right. Nobody likes to be portrayed in a bad light, and a report like this, even though you don't see specific names, casts a very dark shadow over a lot of these governments. What I think as IOM we advocate is for every single government to respect the basic human rights of migrants, regardless of their status while they're on the move. Yes, every single country has the right as a sovereign country to regulate who comes in and out of their country. But the fact that a migrant doesn't have the necessary document doesn't remove the basic human rights afforded to him or her by virtue of being a human. And this is what we advocate at that level to every single government, that you should respect that basic right and yes, follow the law. But the mistreatment of migrants cannot be accepted under any circumstances, regardless of their status during the migratory process.
I want to say many thanks to you, Franz Celestin, the Chief of Mission of the International Organization for Migration. Thank you for joining us today on Newsday.